Biology has veto power.
And there's really no better way to illustrate that veto power than with just a shocking story that really underscores what happens when you ignore that maintenance.
Mm.
We have to go back to the morning of April 6, 2007.
Okay.
Talking about Arianna Huffington, the co-founder of the Huffington Post. At this point in time, the platform is in its early, chaotic, just breakneck growth phase. And she's running on pure adrenaline and ambition.
She was the poster child for someone trying to outwork the clock, right? Thinking she could just trade a few hours of sleep here and there for a competitive edge. The fatigue wasn't just a one-off thing, it had become her chronic state.
She was pushing past every single signal her body was sending her. And this is where the system just fails spectacularly. She wasn't just tired, she was fundamentally depleted. And then at her desk, her body simply refused to go on. She collapsed.
And the sources are so clear about how serious this was. This wasn't a minor, feeling faint. As she fell, her head hit the sharp corner of her desk.
And when she woke up, she was in a pool of blood. She had a broken cheekbone and needed 5 stitches over her eye.
That imagery, waking up in a pool of your own blood, you just have to sit with that for a second. It's critical.
We have to linger on that because it completely changes the conversation about something as simple as work-life balance. This wasn't just minor fatigue. This was a catastrophic failure of the infrastructure, a forced system shutdown.
In that moment, the size of her business, the next big headline, all that ambition, none of it mattered.
Not at all. It forced her into a complete rewrite of what success even meant because her body had taken the ultimate corrective action. It sent the bill.
And it's the ultimate non-negotiable invoice, isn't it? For all that deferred maintenance. You can't buy back the hours you lose to a physical breakdown, and you can't even begin to calculate the cost of all the mistakes you made from that slow, quiet, cognitive decline in the years leading up to the collapse.
Precisely. And that brings us to the first, most fundamental piece of that infrastructure we have to protect. It's why the playwright Thomas Dekker called sleep that golden chain that ties health and our bodies together.
Okay, so let's really unpack that. If we accept this idea, if we shift our thinking and agree that sleep isn't time lost, but it's a mandatory investment, what's the specific tangible payoff for the person trying to build wealth? What is the economic function of getting high-quality sleep?
The economic function is all about the consistency and reliability of your cognitive output. I mean, think about it. If building wealth is really about making slightly better decisions than everyone else over and over again,
Day after day.
day after day, then sleep is what guarantees the quality control on those decisions. The payoff is mainly in 2 areas. Your prefrontal cortex function, that's where judgment, planning, and impulse control live, and your metabolic stability.
Let's stick with the brain first. We all know that being tired makes us grumpy, but how does the actual physical process of sleep deprivation directly sabotage your financial or career judgment?
Well, when you have sleep debt, and I mean even minor chronic debt, it basically cripples your prefrontal cortex. That's the CEO of your brain.
Okay.
And when the CEO is offline, the more emotional reactive parts of your brain, like the amygdala, they become hyperactive.
So you're more emotional, more reactive.
Exactly. It means you disproportionately focus on threat and risk, which leads to panic reactions like, say, selling low during a market downturn. And it also pushes you towards this short-term instant gratification bias.
That is fascinating. So it's not just that you feel sleepy. Your brain's actual ability to assess risk is physically degraded. And it's pushing you toward these really expensive, short-sighted choices.
Absolutely. One bad night of sleep and you just choose worse.
Yes.
Consistently, you're more likely to experience what the sources call ego depletion.
And what does that look like in the real world?
It looks like skipping your non-negotiable morning workout. It looks like procrastinating on the hard, important tasks. It looks like misreading the subtle, nonverbal cues in a critical negotiation. Or, and this is probably the most common one, it's using impulse spending to just make yourself feel better because your brain is too tired to self-regulate.
So that decision to order a $50 takeout meal instead of taking 5 minutes to make something cheap and healthy, that's not really a failure of willpower.
No, it's an expensive downstream consequence of a cheap, immediate choice you made the night before, stealing that 1 hour from your sleep.
Oh, okay.
And the second critical function is metabolic consistency. The data is just overwhelming here. It strongly supports setting the adult baseline at least 7 hours a night. Anything less is just not sufficient for full recovery. We see this leverage so clearly when you look at the link between sleep duration and chronic disease risk.
Tell us more about that link, specifically around something like type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, the research shows again and again that the lowest risk of type 2 diabetes, which is a condition that will absolutely sabotage your long-term energy, your focus, your earning capacity, that lowest risk is clustered right around 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And the mechanism behind this is key for anyone focused on energy.
Okay, what is that mechanism?
It really comes down to two things.
Yeah.
Cortisol and insulin sensitivity. When you're sleep deprived, your body pumps out more of the stress hormone, cortisol, and that tells your body to dump glucose into your bloodstream, the classic fight or flight energy. But more importantly, there are controlled sleep restriction studies showing that not getting enough sleep can reduce your insulin sensitivity by a significant amount.
Let's break down insulin sensitivity. It sounds technical, but it seems like it has huge implications for just your day-to-day performance.
It really does. So think of insulin as the key that unlocks your cells, letting glucose sugar get inside to be used for energy. Insulin sensitivity is just how easily that key works.
Makes sense.
When you lose sensitivity, when you become resistant, your cells start to ignore the key. The glucose stays high in your blood, your body panics and pumps out even more insulin. It's a vicious cycle.
Right.
And the end result for a high performer is constant fatigue, these wild energy spikes and crashes, and just persistent, gnawing cravings for junk.
So if I consistently sleep less than 7 hours, I am literally making my energy management and my appetite regulation harder every single day, which just degrades my ability to stick to any plan, whether it's financial or nutritional.
That's the leverage principle right there. The default habit says, if I steal an hour from sleep, I can buy an hour of progress. But the wealth-worthy habit says, if I protect my sleep, I buy better decisions and stable energy with the exact same number of waking hours.
Okay, that's a powerful reframe. But, implementing this is really hard for the busy executive or the entrepreneur whose schedule is just chaos. How do you protect this asset without your bedtime routine turning into another stressful, hyper-optimized job?
We have to focus on leverage, not perfection. And the most critical tool, first and foremost, is setting a 7-hour floor, not a perfect schedule.
A floor, not a schedule. I like that.
Yeah, you prioritize the duration over having a precise bedtime. So if you know you have a huge meeting at 9 a.m., you just count back 7 hours from when you need to wake up, and that becomes your absolute latest time to start your wind down. The floor is just so much easier to stick to than a rigid schedule.
So you're framing it as risk management. You're setting a minimum threshold, and below that, catastrophic decision failure becomes much more likely.
Exactly. And next, we have to talk about the biggest saboteur of good sleep: caffeine. The rule should be a caffeine cutoff 8 to 10 hours before bed. Or, at a bare minimum, no caffeine after lunch.
But so many high performers swear by that late afternoon coffee. They say it helps them power through, and they feel just fine sleeping after it. Where does that argument fall apart?
They're adapted, but they're not optimal. Caffeine has a half-life of about 5 to 6 hours. So if you have coffee at 3 p.m., half of that caffeine is still floating around in your system at 8 or 9 p.m. A quarter of it is still there at 1 or 2 in the morning.
Wow.
So it's still messing with your deep sleep cycles, your slow wave sleep, your REM sleep, even if you manage to fall asleep quickly. It's reducing the restorative quality of that 7-hour block, so you wake up still cognitively impaired, thinking you got enough rest, but you didn't.
So the adaptation is really just masking inefficiency, and it ensures you need more caffeine the next day to feel normal. It's an expensive cycle to be in.
A very expensive cycle. Then, of course, there's the device curfew. You have to power down those bright blue light-emitting screens at least 30 minutes before bed. The blue light suppresses your melatonin production, which delays the signal to your brain that it's time to sleep. And, critically, keep the phone physically out of reach, off the pillow. The bedroom needs to be a secure recovery room for tomorrow's earnings, not a command center.
I think the most powerful tool here is actually a mindset shift.
Yeah.
You have to calendar your sleep like it's a non-negotiable meeting with your future, sharper self. I mean, you wouldn't cancel a meeting with a high-value client, right? So why would you cancel the meeting with the person who has to do all the high-value work tomorrow?
Absolutely. And to make this really actionable, there's a great technique to stop that mental racing we all get when we finally lie down.
Okay.
Tonight, just pick a hard stop time. Set an alarm on your phone and label it. Start shutdown. Then, in the 5 minutes right before you get into bed, write down tomorrow's top 3 essential tasks on a piece of paper.
That's fantastic advice. It's like an offloading mechanism because the brain stays awake holding all that critical information, that to-do list.
Exactly. Getting it onto paper is literally like transferring that cognitive load to an external hard drive. It frees up your mind to actually start the rest process. And for the next 7 days, just track your sleep duration. Just observe. Note how you feel when you wake up. Don't even try to change anything at first. Just get your baseline. You can't manage what you don't measure.
So the final thought for this section, and it's a powerful one, the cheapest way to get richer is to stop buying tomorrow with your sleep. Okay, so moving from the purely physical recovery of sleep to mental regulation. This is where, for me, it gets really interesting. We're going from preventing physical collapse to actively building the mental competitive edge you need for consistency.
I agree. If sleep determines your judgment in the moment, your nervous system regulation determines your consistency and your resilience over decades. We have to start seeing chronic stress, not just as, an unpleasant feeling, but as a quantifiable financial threat. Well, if you panic and you liquidate all your investments during a market dip, that is a failure of your nervous system regulation just as much as it's a failure of your investment strategy.
The cost of emotional inconsistency is just enormous on the wealth building journey. And we have a perfect anecdote from the sources on this from one of the most successful investors in history, Ray Dalio.
Yeah, in 2012 at Georgetown University, Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, gave this now famous presentation. And this is a guy known for being highly systematic, quantitative, data-driven.
The opposite of woo-woo.
Exactly. And yet here he was, championing something that seems totally non-quantitative, meditation. And he wasn't presenting it as some personal quirk. He presented it as a core competitive advantage.
What's so compelling to me is his timeline. He started practicing transcendental meditation way back in 1968. Which means he developed and ingrained this habit while he was building Bridgewater from the ground up, not as some luxury he picked up after he'd already made it.
That is the absolute hinge point. He explicitly said that meditation was the biggest ingredient of whatever success he'd had. He knew he needed a reliable way to stay calm enough to actually execute his principles, to think clearly over and over again through decades of extreme market volatility, political chaos, internal business conflicts.
So his meditation practice gave him the buffer he needed to decouple his emotions from his actions.
Precisely. The core principle here is that stress doesn't just make the work feel bad. It fundamentally changes the quality of the work itself.
Right.
Wealth grows better in a regulated body. Chronic stress is a measurable physiological state. You have high cortisol, your heart rate is erratic, and it pushes you toward short-term relief in impulsive behavior. It makes it nearly impossible to stick to a profitable long-term plan when your emotions are spiking. Your body is signaling danger, even when your rational mind knows the plan is solid.
So if the stock market drops 10%, your regulated body says, okay, this is expected risk, I'm going to execute the plan I already made. But your unregulated body, which is just fueled by adrenaline and panic, is screaming, sell everything right now to make this painful feeling stop.
And that emotional impulse is consistently the most expensive decision a person makes in their financial life. And this isn't just theory. There was a major systematic review in the JAMA Internal Medicine Journal, sponsored by AHRQ. That's a key government body that reviews evidence.
So this is serious research.
Very serious. And they found moderate evidence that meditation programs improve anxiety and depression-related outcomes. The reason AHRQ matters is because their review suggests these practices are medically and behaviorally valuable, not just, anecdotal wellness trends. A calmer baseline makes consistency easier, and consistency is where compounding returns happen, financially and professionally.
The default habit is to just white-knuckle it. I'll relax after I make it. But the principle here is about sequencing. I regulate myself now so that I can execute the long-term plan to make it. A 20-minute mental reset, though, it sounds like just another thing to fail at for someone who feels like they don't even have 5 spare minutes.
It does.
So what's the low-friction entry point?
The low-friction entry point is realizing that regulating your system is more critical than optimizing your email inbox. Dalio's idea was these 20-minute vacations, but for a beginner, we recommend the Physiological Sigh by 3. It's a tool for rapid reset during high-pressure moments.
Walk us through the mechanics of that. How does it work so quickly?
The physiological sigh is unique. It specifically targets the vagus nerve, which is like the superhighway connecting your brain and your gut and your organs. It's responsible for activating your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest system. So you take a deep inhale through your nose, and then at the very top, you take another short, sharp inhale to maximally inflate the little alveoli sacs in your lungs. Then you do a long, slow exhale through your mouth. That long exhale is a powerful signal to the vagus nerve that the immediate threat is over. It rapidly lowers your heart rate and switches you out of fight or flight mode. You do that 3 times before you open that high-stakes email or walk into that difficult conversation.
So you're turning an emotional spike into a brief, targeted physical intervention to get your clarity back. That's incredibly actionable.
Another tool is to build a decision buffer. We can adopt the HALT framework, but we need to explicitly connect it back to our first section. You avoid big money moves or high-pressure negotiations when you are hungry, angry, lonely, or, and this is the crucial part, tired. Fatigue, as we said, is the silent killer of good judgment.
If you're making critical decisions while you're even slightly depleted, you're just introducing massive unnecessary risk into your entire plan.
And finally, you have to close the loop with motion. If you have a tense meeting, a difficult client call, any kind of conflict, take a 10-minute walk immediately afterward. The movement physically discharges the adrenaline and cortisol from your system. It signals to your body that the threat has passed.
And that stops your mind from just replaying the stressful event on a loop, which is a form of mental debt.
Exactly.
So let's give the listener the micro steps to beat that friction and get started.
Okay, right now, for 2 minutes, set a timer and just breathe slowly. Focus only on making your exhale noticeably longer than your inhale. That simple action starts the regulatory process. Then today, choose a daily anchor for this practice. After your first cup of coffee, right after lunch, whatever. A meditation habit that just floats in your day won't stick. You have to chain it to an existing habit to make it automatic.
Chaining makes it less dependent on willpower. I like that.
And for this week, write a tiny script for high-stress moments and put it somewhere visible. The script is just: pause, breathe 3 times, ask, what's the next true step? That simple question forces you out of that emotional reaction and back into rational analysis.
The synthesis here is so clear. Your money plan can't outrun your nervous system, so you have to train the system that holds the plan. All right, so we've gone from the internal operating system to the physical structure itself. For someone focused on long-term wealth, this physical infrastructure has to be viewed as an appreciating asset, but it's one that requires mandatory upkeep. What happens when your body sends a massive high-cost bill for years of deferred maintenance?
For that, we turn to the catastrophic experience of Mark Bertolini. In 2004, he was just entering senior leadership at the massive health insurer Aetna, so he's already operating at an extremely high level, managing immense responsibility. And then the infrastructure failed.
Remind us again just how bad that accident was.
He was skiing, and he had a near-fatal fall. He crashed into a tree, broke his neck in multiple places, and then fell into an icy river. I mean, it's the kind of event that just stops a career cold. He survived, but his quality of life, his capacity for work were just fundamentally compromised.
And the sources note that he left the hospital on multiple narcotics and was dealing with constant grinding pain. This is the detail that's so crucial for that high performer to hear.
Because that chronic pain, it doesn't just hurt. It consumes your cognitive bandwidth. It steals your attention, your patience, your clarity. It makes every single decision a high-friction event. I mean, can you imagine trying to steer a multi-billion-dollar company while you're battling chronic, debilitating pain and a narcotic dependency?
It's impossible.
So when the standard medical tools failed to get him back to his former capacity, he made a strategic shift. He turned to yoga and meditation.
And he wasn't doing this as a hobby. It was rehabilitation. It was a necessity for him to regain his cognitive function and clarity, not just for physical relief.
Precisely. And the key moment is that he later publicly linked his recovery, his reliance on movement and regulation, to how he was able to successfully lead Aetna. He even ended up implementing those practices into the company culture. He demonstrated that movement and regulation, they aren't secondary perks, they are fundamental prerequisites for sustained, high-level output.
So the core principle here is that movement is the daily deposit that keeps your earning engine running. It's not about how you look, it's about protecting your energy and preserving your ability to generate income for decades to come.
And your body doesn't wait until you've made it to send you the bill. If you neglect that physical infrastructure, the maintenance cost in lost time, medical bills, impaired decision quality is steep and it's incredibly disruptive. We have to start seeing the sedentary lifestyle as a direct tax on our future earning potential.
Let's get into the data on that. What's the minimum deposit we really need to be making, daily or weekly?
We can use the World Health Organization, WHO guidance, as the gold standard for preventive care. It recommends adults get at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week.
Which is just 30 minutes, 5 days a week.
Right, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity. But crucially, it also mandates incorporating muscle strengthening work on 2 or more days per week.
That seems achievable, but for the modern professional, the real enemy is the 10 or 12 hours spent sitting motionless. Is an hour at the gym really enough to counteract the harm of all those other sedentary hours?
That's the sitting tax, and the answer is no. An hour at the gym isn't enough by itself. A massive meta-analysis in The Lancet looked at sitting time and mortality risk. It confirmed that high sitting time is strongly associated with a higher risk of mortality, but it also showed that high physical activity can meaningfully blunt that risk.
So you're in a constant battle against entropy.
You are.
Yeah.
You can't work out for an hour and then sit motionless for the other 15 waking hours and expect to neutralize that biological drag.
So the wealth-worthy habit becomes recognizing that movement is non-negotiable because the cost of chronic immobility is just too high. How do we get this friction-free movement into a packed schedule?
We have to start by protecting the identity of being someone who moves daily. And you do that by setting a 10-minute movement minimum. On your chaotic days, don't aim for the gym. Just aim for 10 minutes of uninterrupted motion, a walk, taking the stairs, simple bodyweight squats. This minimum deposit protects the identity of I am a person who moves daily no matter what.
But does 10 minutes actually move the needle biologically, or is it mostly a psychological trick?
It moves the needle on both. Biologically, it spikes your heart rate, increases circulation, burns off some of that cortisol and adrenaline from stress, and psychologically, it breaks that all-or-nothing thinking. 10 minutes is always infinitely better than 0, and it maintains your momentum, which is the most valuable currency in habit change.
And how do we fight that sitting tax throughout the day?
We have to spend down our sitting time. Every hour, you stand up for 2 or 3 minutes, and you anchor that standing to things you already do. When you finish an email, stand up. When you refill your water, stand up. Do 10 squats while your coffee is brewing. You're just integrating these micro movements into periods of forced inactivity.
And what about the mandated strength work? That's often the highest point of friction for people.
For that, we use the 2-day strength rule. You just pick 2 specific, non-consecutive days for simple strength work. This doesn't require a gym membership or complicated machines. We're talking simple movements that hit major muscle groups. Push-ups against a wall or a counter, squats to a sturdy chair, using resistance bands for rows. This meets the major health guidelines without demanding a ton of your calendar time.
And then the time-saving hack, which I love, walk one audio-only meeting per day. Movement that doesn't require extra calendar space is the easiest kind to keep. If a meeting doesn't require screen sharing, put on your shoes and walk around the neighborhood or just pace your office. You solve 2 calendar problems at once.
For the micro steps, right now, just stand up and take 50 slow steps, focusing on breathing deeply. Today, schedule your 10-minute movement minimum like it's a meeting that cannot be moved. And this week, pick those 2 specific days for your 15 minutes of simple strength work and treat them as non-negotiable appointments.
The final maxim for this section is a great one. Your body is your first business, so move like you plan to stay open. Okay, so if movement is the daily deposit that protects your capacity, food is the fuel. We need to start looking at nutrition through the lens of investment logic. Reliable patterns over short-term gratification. And for this, let's look at the highest profile nutritional wake-up call in our sources. Former President Bill Clinton.
Clinton's journey is such a powerful illustration that wealth does not insulate you from the consequences of poor dietary patterns. His first crisis was life-altering. On September 6, 2004, he underwent a quadruple bypass surgery. This is a massive physical event. They are literally rerouting the blood supply to your heart.
And most people would see that as the definitive wake-up call, right? The moment where the lifestyle has to change completely. But the most important lesson for our listener is what happens 6 years later.
Right. In February 2010, he went back to the hospital with chest discomfort and ended up receiving 2 stents. That second crisis proved that the underlying pattern was still collecting payments even after a major surgery. Your body doesn't forgive a flawed operating strategy just because you had a bypass.
It really highlighted that just having information or even getting medical intervention, it's not the same as changing the habits that caused the problem in the first place. It's a perfect analogy for financial behavior. Correcting one mistake doesn't guarantee future success if the underlying system hasn't changed.
That's absolutely right. And it was after the stenting that Clinton made that very public, documented shift toward a largely plant-based pattern. He started emphasizing beans, legumes, vegetables, and fruit as the reliable, high-yield foundation of his diet. The core truth is, you can't outsource the health of your arteries, no matter how many resources you have.
This brings us to the principle. Eat like an investor. We're aiming for a repeatable pattern. We're trying to minimize decisions that will impose massive costs on us later. And we're building systems that make the good choice the default choice.
An investor seeks consistent, diversified, long-term returns. Food has to be treated the same way. The American Heart Association, AHA guidance, which is designed to protect your most expensive organ, emphasizes an overall dietary pattern. A pattern rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, healthy proteins, whether that's plant or lean animal, and liquid non-tropical oils. And crucially, limiting added sugars, salt, and highly processed items.
Does this mean we have to completely overhaul our lives? Or can small, consistent changes produce the leverage we need?
The sources are clear. It's about the power of consistent patterns, not drastic temporary overhauls. Look at the PREDIM trial. It was a randomized study that showed that just by supplementing a Mediterranean-style diet with either extra virgin olive oil or nuts, they significantly reduced major cardiovascular events in high-risk people.
That's powerful.
It's powerful evidence that a focused, consistent investment in healthy fats and produce pays massive preventative dividends.
And then on the flip side, you have the ultra-processed convenience foods, the things that fuel that I'm too busy to eat well mindset.
And that convenience is a high-cost, low-grade fuel. A systematic review in the American Journal of Epidemiology found associations between high ultra-processed food intake and a higher risk of all-cause mortality. These foods are designed to be hypopalatable and cheap, but they introduce a huge inflammatory load and energy instability. When you eat refined sugars and highly processed ingredients, you get a sharp, immediate energy spike. That's your quick return. But it's followed by a crash that forces you to eat again quickly. That's the high cost of a high glycemic load.
So the wealth-worthy habit is making convenience healthier because stable energy is the foundation of cognitive endurance. How do we actually implement this investment logic into our daily structure?
We start with the default plate. You just aim for a visual proportion. Half of your plate is vegetables or fruit, a quarter is protein, and a quarter is high-fiber carbs. This aligns naturally with heart-healthy patterns. Think beans, lentils, whole grains like quinoa, sweet potatoes. It's a simple visual guide for consistent compliance. You don't need scales or obsessive calorie tracking.
It's about proportion and quality of input, not about exclusion.
And we also need to prioritize consistency over variety. Build a favorite protein, anchor eggs, Greek yogurt, canned beans, pre-cooked lentils, and just rotate those 2 or 3 items. Consistency absolutely beats variety when it comes to adherence, especially when your time is limited.
And critically, how do we budget for those high-cost impulse items, the ultra-processed foods?
You treat them exactly like impulse spending. They're allowed, but they're budgeted. They're not the base layer of your portfolio. But the most critical system of all is the emergency meal.
Okay.
Healthy habits don't fail during planned meals. They fail during emergencies. The late night at the office, the delayed flight, that sudden wave of exhaustion.
So planning for failure is actually the greatest strategy.
It is. You have to decide on a healthy backup meal and then stock it permanently. It could be canned beans, a carton of eggs, frozen vegetables, a small bag of nuts and fruit. If you have a healthy backup that takes 5 minutes to assemble, you don't surrender to the nearest drive-thru, which is always the high-cost, low-yield option.
That system thinking is key, so the micro steps should focus on tiny, immediate tweaks.
Exactly. For your next meal, just add 1 extra serving of plants, a handful of spinach in your eggs, an apple after lunch. No other rules. Today, identify your perfect emergency meal and commit to stocking the ingredients for it once this week. And for your next 2 days, just replace 1 ultra-processed snack with a high-fiber option. Keep it simple. Simple is scalable, and simple is profitable.
And the snap close maxim here has to be, eat for the life you're building, not the stress you're escaping. You can't budget for what you refuse to track, and that principle applies most critically to health risk. We're moving now into the ultimate form of preventative risk management, which is screening. This is the mandatory due diligence on your life and your future earning stream.
This section really emphasizes a crucial point. Success and wealth do not grant you immunity from preventable disease. You can be fit, you can be successful, and still be completely blindsided by a biological risk that could have been mitigated by just a short-term inconvenience. And for this, we have to turn to the story of Katie Couric.
Couric's crisis was just devastatingly personal. Her husband, Jay Monahan, died of colon cancer in 1998, and he was only 42 years old. That kind of sudden catastrophe completely derails a life. It can introduce massive medical debt and, by extension, just destroy any long-term financial plan you had in place.
That loss galvanized her. 2 years later, in March of 2000, Couric took this incredibly public, brave action. She underwent a colonoscopy on live TV on NBC's Today Show. This was not for entertainment. It was a deeply personal plea for public awareness, aimed at demystifying a procedure that people often avoid because of fear or just squeamishness.
And the sources show that her action had a measurable, real-world result. Researchers documented what became known as the Couric effect, a rise of nearly 20% in colonoscopy use across the country in the months right after that broadcast. It just confirms the power of awareness and reducing social friction.
The principle here is undeniable. Preventive care is a wealth strategy. It is a short-term inconvenience, booking the appointment, dealing with the paperwork, to prevent a long-term catastrophe. The financial cost of treating late-stage disease is staggering, not to mention the complete loss of your earning capacity. And serious conditions like colon cancer, they often don't escalate with an email warning. They're silent until they break the entire system.
And the screening guidelines for colon cancer have recently shifted, which makes this even more relevant for our listeners who are in their 40s.
They have. The U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, or USPSTF, they're the independent panel of experts that sets these public health standards. They now recommend screening for adults starting at age 45.
Not 50.
Not 50 anymore. The shift down to 45 is a direct response to new evidence showing a rising incidence of colorectal cancer in younger populations. So if you are 45 or older, this is now a non-negotiable piece of risk management, just like insuring a key piece of property.
The default habit is, I'm too busy building my future to book checkups. But the wealth-worthy habit has to be, because I'm building my future, I prioritize my checkups because the loss of my earning capacity is my single greatest risk. So what are the actionable tools to overcome the friction of booking these appointments?
First, build a simple screening dashboard. It can be a single note on your phone or a physical piece of paper. You just list the dates of your last physical, your last dental and vision appointments, and any age-appropriate screenings your doctor recommends. This keeps the information management easy and trackable.
Right, you can't track what you don't measure.
Second, make it automatic. Schedule next year's annual visit before you leave the current one. The hardest part is just initiating the process. If it's on your calendar 11 months from now, it requires no future willpower. And finally, use the two-call rule to overcome complex appointment friction. If you need a referral from your primary doctor and an appointment with a specialist, make both of those calls back-to-back. Don't stop after the first call and let inertia build up and prevent you from closing that loop.
Okay, so let's give the micro steps for this critical area.
For 2 minutes, just write down the date of your last annual checkup. If you don't know, just write unknown. Today, set one calendar reminder titled Book Annual Checkup for a specific date within the next 7 days. And this week, call or message your clinic and simply ask, what preventive screenings am I due for based on my age and my family history?
The best time to protect your future is definitely before your future needs protecting. But screening for those big events is only part of the story. Knowing your internal daily metrics, that's the necessary day-to-day data management. And for this, we turn to a story of a professional whose entire brand was built on physical health, Bob Harper.
Yeah, Bob Harper was one of the most visible fitness experts in the world. He was famous as a trainer and the face of The Biggest Loser. And in February 2017, in New York City, he suffered a severe widowmaker heart attack. He went into cardiac arrest during a workout at the gym. And this is a guy who looked like the picture of peak health.
That's the cruelest irony, isn't it? A man who lived the healthy lifestyle, and yet the risk was still hidden.
And he only survived because 2 doctors happened to be in the gym at that moment and could intervene immediately. The lesson he learned wasn't about doing more reps or eating cleaner, though those things are essential. The lesson was that risk is broader than just your external fitness. It includes your genetics. He noted that his mother had also died of a heart attack. His exercise wasn't a medical shield against underlying risk factors that he hadn't fully measured or addressed.
Which proves the principle. Stop operating blind. Hidden risk exists even in people who look strong. This is just financial due diligence applied to your own body.
What you don't measure, you pay for. Tracking your internal numbers allows for earlier intervention. It helps you test if your lifestyle changes are actually working, and it reduces the odds of a sudden, expensive crisis that just destroys all your momentum. We need to focus on the basic 4 metrics that every learner should track and understand.
Okay, what are these basic 4 and why are they so high leverage?
The basic 4 are blood pressure, your lipids or cholesterol, your blood sugar screening, and your waist or weight trend. These are all non-negotiable indicators of your cardiovascular and metabolic health.
Let's focus on the silent killer, blood pressure, or BP. Why is that one so important in this context?
High blood pressure is the silent killer because it often has absolutely no symptoms, but it's constantly damaging your arteries, which are the pipes of your earning engine. Normal BP is considered below 20/80. Consistently high BP raises your risk for heart disease, kidney disease, and stroke, all major causes of disability and death. If you don't know this number, you're making decisions about your future based on faulty assumptions about your biological foundation.
So how do we track this number effectively without making it another source of stress?
You track it at home, consistently. Invest in a reliable home blood pressure cuff. You have to track using the same device, on the same arm, and in the same time window a few days a week. And crucially, you have to sit calmly for 5 minutes before you measure and don't talk during the reading. Trends over time beat those one-off readings you get in a stressful doctor's office where white coat syndrome often skews the results high.
And what about lipids? Most people just hear cholesterol and they assume it's all bad.
We need to understand the difference between the good and the bad cholesterol. LDL, that's low-density lipoprotein, is the bad cholesterol. It's what deposits fat in your artery walls. HDL, high-density lipoprotein, is the good cholesterol. It acts like a scavenger, picking up excess cholesterol and taking it back to the liver. Knowing those two numbers, along with your triglycerides, is essential for calculating your cardiovascular risk portfolio.
So tracking these numbers is really about converting this vague sense of risk into quantifiable data that we can then actively manage.
Absolutely. Record those basic four in one central note. And remember, if you have a family history of early heart disease, you must tell your doctor. Don't treat that history as just trivia. Treat it as high-risk, unpriced information that requires immediate attention.
And finally, what about a financial strategy to mitigate the shock of these health surprises?
You need to build a health sinking fund. Even with good insurance, unexpected costs, high-deductible labs, specialist visits, out-of-pocket medication, they can cause a significant financial shock. A small monthly contribution to a separate fund lowers that financial instability and protects your overall financial plan when the inevitable health bumps occur.
Your final maxim for this section: you can't budget what you refuse to track, and that includes your health. We've taken a really comprehensive deep dive today, treating health as the highest form of leverage. It's the infrastructure that all your future wealth is built on. We covered the 5 high-leverage decisions that affect the outcome of your entire wealth journey. Sleep for critical judgment.
Calm for emotional consistency.
Movement for sustained earning capacity.
Food is reliable, high-yield fuel.
And data, both screening and numbers, for proactive risk management.
The common thread that runs through all these stories, Huffington, Dalio, Berlini, Clinton, Harper, Kirk, it's just overwhelmingly powerful. These are all people who achieved staggering levels of success and wealth. Yet every single one of them had to learn this essential health lesson only when biology violently intervened and issued a non-negotiable veto. Health isn't just about avoiding death. It is about maximizing the decades of high-quality, high-output, high-earning potential that you have available to you.
These habits, they're not optional. They're not secondary. They are the prerequisite for making those high-stakes financial and career moves consistently and intelligently, decade after decade. Neglecting them is just introducing exponential risk into your most valuable asset.
And if you are willing to manage risk, track your KPIs, perform due diligence, and consistently invest capital in your venture, which you are, because that's the work of building wealth, then why would you neglect the primary non-replaceable asset that generates all of your future income? And that's where we want to leave you today with a final provocative thought to carry with you.
You meticulously track your net worth yearly, some of you monthly. If your total lifetime earning capacity is undeniably your single most valuable asset, how often do you schedule its mandatory maintenance review?